Welcome to this video. On the channel you can find some videos about Power BI already. Feel free to have a look at these if you want to. But if you really want to dive deeper into the tool and get kind of a, more comprehensive introduction, then I also got a 10 hours Udemy course about Power BI. It's called Power BI, a complete introduction. And in this video, I want to give you a course excerpt. This means you get the first hour, or I think the first 15 minutes to be more precise, of this course to get an idea of Power BI, about the content of the course, and about what you're going to learn in there. You can also find a link to the course down there in the video description, but for now, have fun with the excerpt and especially have fun with Power BI. Let's start with the answer to the most important question first. What is Power BI actually? If you look at the homepage, you can find the following text. So Power BI is a suite of business analytics tools. It allows you to work on data, to create reports, to publish that reports, and a lot more. This sounds really great. But we have to take a closer look at that to really understand how this works. So we already know that Power BI is not a single tool, but consists of multiple tools. Additionally, we have that building blocks. Let's see what that is. The first tool is Power BI Desktop, the local application only available on Windows. In Power BI Desktop, we have the first building block, the datasets. Now, what is a dataset? A dataset simply describes the data or the information that you have in your data model. You can either connect Power BI Desktop to predefined datasets, so you simply import the data into the data model and then you're done, or you can create your own datasets. This would mean that you connect Power BI Desktop to different source files in so-called queries. We will talk about that throughout the course, and then work on those queries. As soon as you finished your work, you will then load that newly created structure into the data model and by that have your own dataset. Now in both cases you are not done right here, because you want to visualize your data, right? To do this, you need the second building block, the visualizations. A visualization is simply a chart or a table, so everything that, visualizes your data. With the visualizations, we have the third building block, the tiles. Tiles are simply the area of your visualizations, so kind of the frame around it. You can change the height or the width and the position of the tiles just as you prefer. The only limitation is the space on your report page. Reports? Yes, we also have reports in Power BI Desktop. And reports are the fourth building block. You can simply create multiple pages with different visualizations just as you prefer. And the summary or the combination of the pages, this is the report. So this is Power BI Desktop. You can create datasets and visualize the data in visualizations. And the combination of multiple visualizations on multiple pages, this is the report then. Now the second tool is Power BI Service. This is a cloud application, and by that not limited to Windows only, which allows you to share your results and to collaborate in your projects with your colleagues. But if we look at the different building blocks, we can see that those are equal to the ones that we just saw in Power BI Desktop. Now what's the difference? Power BI Service can of course be connected to different datasets. But the creation of that own datasets we just talked about in Power BI Desktop, so the connection to different source files, then the work on those queries, and by that the creation of that new structure that you then load into your data model, this is not possible in Power BI Service. So Power BI Service is the tool to connect to existing datasets. Power BI Desktop is the tool to create new datasets in. That's an important difference. However, as we can connect Power BI Service to those existing datasets and also to that created datasets in Power BI Desktop, of course, we can also create visualizations and reports. But the functionality of the creation of the visualizations and of the reports, we know that from Power BI Desktop already, right? So we will not create visualizations and reports in Power BI Service in that course. We will learn how this works in Power BI Desktop. And the functionality and the interface, as I said, when it comes to the creation of that visualizations, is the same between those two tools. Now, what else can we do in Power BI Service then? Well, we talked about the sharing and collaborating, and we will learn how this works. But there is one additional building block that is only available in Power BI Service. And those are the dashboards. Now, what is a dashboard? Well, when we talk about a dashboard, simply think about a cover page. So one single page which summarizes the key facts of your report. This is the dashboard, so this first page you see. If you want to dive deeper, then you can jump into the report and get more information about your data. So this is the second tool, this sharing, collaborating tool with the creation of the dashboards. Let's quickly summarize what we learned so far. We have Power BI Desktop, the local application, where we can create our datasets, our visualizations, and our reports. We then publish that information to Power BI Service, the cloud solution. In there, we can also collaborate with colleagues, for example, if we want, or add dashboards to our existing data. So we have the data in the cloud. Now, if we now use the third tool, Power BI Mobile, a mobile app, as the name says, this will allow us to access the data that we loaded to Power BI Service from our mobile devices. And we will also take a look at Power BI Mobile, of course, and see how this app works and what we can do with it. So those are the three core tools of Power BI that we need and that we will talk about in detail throughout that course. But we will show you more. We will show you Power BI for developers also. Power BI for developers is made to customize your Power BI experience. This means you can create your own customized visuals, and you will see how this works throughout that course. And you can also embed your Power BI results into your own existing apps with Power BI embedded. Something that is rather related to your own app and not directly connected to Power BI. Because of that, we will not cover this topic as part of this course. However, with that Power BI for Developers block, we now have an overview of the entire Power BI universe that we will talk about throughout that course. And now I think it's time that we start with our first little project, right? Let's do this, and let's start with the first tool, Power BI Desktop, the local application. Well, and to work with this local application, we first have to download and install it. Let's do this in the next video. We want to create our first little project in Power BI Desktop. Let's now download it and connect it to the first data. So this is the homepage of Power BI that we saw in the last video. If we now go to Products up here and select Power BI Desktop, then we have two options, Download and Advanced Download options. If you press Download, then the download will immediately start and then you can install Power BI Desktop, but you couldn't choose your language. And you can't change the language after you install Power BI Desktop. So I would press Advanced Download Options right here. If you then scroll down, then you can select the language you want to install Power BI Desktop in right here. I will now select English and press the download button, and I hope you do the same. And then you can simply follow the installation guide, and after that, we will see each other when we start Power BI Desktop together for the first time. We installed Power BI Desktop. Let's open it now. And when you open Power BI Desktop, you can see this Sign In option. This is not necessary at the moment, as we will work locally in Power BI Desktop. We will talk about that sign in later when we talk about Power BI Service, the cloud application. If you want to sign into Power BI Desktop right here, you can of course do that. The only thing you need to know is that you need a work or a school email address. You cannot register with a Gmail address, for instance. However, as we don't have to sign in right here, we will simply click on to Get Data now, right there. And now you can see that you can connect Power BI Desktop to multiple data sources. Now, one quick note before we start. In this first initial project, so in this and the next two videos, I only want to show you how easy to use Power BI Desktop is and how quickly you can create your first visualizations. So in case you don't understand everything I'm doing right here, don't worry. We will talk about everything you see right here and about more throughout the course. So for the moment, just follow my guidance and enjoy Power BI Desktop. So back to our get data function. So we need data and we don't have any. So why don't we just get some data from the web? To do this, we simply can click onto that search bar right here and type web like this. And if we now select the second option right here and press connect at this button, then we can see that we have to enter a URL right here. Well, as we don't have a URL right now, we have to look for one. Let's do this. So a good data set for our first initial project would be GDP data, for instance, for different countries also. You can find data like that if you search for the IMF World Economic Outlook database. So the second result right here. And down here we have the link that we need. Another note. At the time when I recorded that video, the April 2017 version was the latest one. In case you watch this video later, you might have a more recent version. This doesn't change the applied steps that we will do right now. The only thing that changes, of course, is the data. Now, let's click onto that April 2017 version right now, like this. Now we select by countries, up here. Here we can select all countries. Here we click Continue in the right upper part. We said that we want to have GDP data, so let's select the ones at current prices in US dollar right here. Press Continue. And now, one last time, then we got it. Press Prepare Report right here. And now we got a table right there. This is good, and we could also download that table right here. But we don't have to do this, because we can now simply select the URL right there and copy it into our Power BI desktop file. Let's do this. So I now paste the URL into this field and press OK. Now the navigator opened, and the navigator allows us to select the information that we want to retrieve from that web page. So the information we want to connect Power BI desktop to basically. In the left part, you can select the different parts of that page. So if you click onto document right here, for instance, you see that this is not the table that we want. Let's maybe change from the table view up here to the web view, like this. And now you can see that the page is categorized in different tables. And we can also see that table null is not the right one, but table 1 is the correct table. So if we select that by ticking that box right here, which is then also ticked in the left part right there, and then take a look at the table view again, right here, then we can see that we selected the correct data. Well, now that we know that, we simply have to press, well, what do we have to press now? We have two options. We have load and edit. Again, I will not talk about the details right now. You will understand the differences between those two options throughout the course. So just a quick information for the moment. If we press load, then we will immediately load the data into the data model. If we press edit, then we will first open the query editor. The query editor is kind of a separate tool in Power BI Desktop that allows us to prepare the data. So for instance, to delete rows or delete columns or add columns or a lot more. And then load this clean data into the data model. As we first want to prepare the data, we will click edit right here to open that query editor. Now let's press that. And now you can see the query editor with our initial project data for the first time. Let's take a look at what we can do right here. We now connected Power BI Desktop to data. Time to take a look at that data in the query editor. So again, this is probably something totally new for you. You haven't seen that interface before, you don't know what you can do right here, and don't worry, we will talk about all that throughout the course. For the moment, let me just show you how quickly you can now clean that data, then load the data into the data model, and then create beautiful visualizations. So we are in this data preparation step right here. And what you can see up here in the center, where we have our data, that the column names up there, well, those are not really good. A better column name would be the second row, because this should be the country, the subject descriptor should be the second column, and so on. To do this, we have to apply two steps. The first step is we have to delete the first row, this one right here, because we don't need that information in here. The second step then is that we have to turn this second row, which will then be the first row after deleting that current first row. So we want to turn that new first row into the header, the column names. So let's first delete the first row. To do this, we simply go to the Home ribbon right here, and then click onto Remove Rows right here, and select Remove Top Rows, like this. Now we want to remove the top rows starting from the top, which of course excludes the column names. So we simply type 1 to delete that first row and press OK. Now we see that this first row is gone. Now we want to turn this new first row into the column name. To do this, we can stay in the Home ribbon and now press onto Use First Row as headers right here. If we do that, well, then we also got this. So those were the first two steps we had to apply. And with that, we are finished with the work on our rows. Let's take a look at the columns now. So you can simply select a column, of course, and then navigate with the left and right arrow keys on the keyboard. So I think we should keep the country column, the subject descriptor, the units, and the scale. Those columns are fine. But the country and series specific notes, I don't think we need that. Now, if you want to delete that column, you simply have to select the column, what we did right now, then again stay in the Home ribbon, and then press Remove Columns right here, like this. So this column is gone. Let's now take a look at the remaining columns and see if we have to delete anything else. So those year columns are fine. We will talk about those in a few seconds though. And in the last column, yes, I think we should also delete this column. So again, we simply click Remove Columns, and it's gone. So I mentioned this year columns a few seconds ago, because I think the way we display it at the moment is not the best way. Wouldn't it be better if we change that into two columns simply? One column being named years, with all the corresponding years in the corresponding rows of that column, and a second column with the corresponding GDP data. I think so. And what we have to do right now is we have to turn these columns, so these year columns, into rows basically. So the column is named year, and all the rows in that column are the different years. To do this, we simply select the first column, the 2015 column, and now press and hold Shift on the keyboard and select the last column, like this. Now we change from the Home ribbon to the Transform ribbon up here. And now we press that Unpivot Columns function. Again, something we will talk about in detail throughout that course. But for the moment, we simply press that, like this. And as you can see, we simply turned those multiple columns into one single column, with the years being single rows in that column. This was easy, right? Let's continue. Because we have to rename that columns now, because attribute and value, not the best names probably. Let's change that quickly by double-clicking onto the attribute column up here, and now name it year, like this, and press enter. And do the same thing for the GDP column, well, and name it GDP, like this. Now we got that, and now we should make sure that we only have rows in that GDP column where we have data for, because we only want to import the really important information into our data model. So we should take a look at that. Now to see if we have any NAs in this GDP column, we simply click onto that arrow right here. Now scroll down. And as you can see, we have some NAs. So if we unselect that and press OK, those NAs are no longer in that column, and by that won't be loaded into the data model when we finish the work in the query editor. You will see that, of course. Now we got that clean column here. So the only thing we have to do is we have to change the format of the data in here. Why should we change that? Well, if you look at that symbol right here, this ABC, and click it, you can see that at the moment this GDP column or the values in that GDP column are formatted as text. And this is not true. So we should change this. And one way to change this is if we simply change it right here from text to decimal number, for instance. And as you can see, this symbol also changed now from ABC to 1, 2 to indicate that this is a decimal number now. So this was fine, but what if you have to select multiple columns or to change the formats of multiple columns actually? Well, then you have another option in Power BI. You can simply select the first column, like this, and again select all the remaining columns, like that. Now if you go to the transform ribbon again and press detect data type right here, like this, then you can see that the format of the first 4 columns of course didn't change because, well, those are text, so this is fine. But the format of the year column changed to a whole number now, which is fine for the moment. And this is it. We now finished the work in our query editor, so in this data preparation step for our initial project. The next step now is to load that data, that clean data, into the actual data model and create visualizations. We made a great progress in our initial project. Time to continue. So we finished the work in that query editor. If you want to load the data into the data model now, then you simply go to the home ribbon, like this, and press close and apply right here. If we do this, then we can see that the interface changed because now we are in the actual data model. And again, I have to repeat myself. You probably haven't seen it before, this interface and what you can do right here. Don't worry, we'll talk about that in detail throughout the course. For the moment, I just want to show you the basics that we need for our initial project. So we are now in the so-called report view. So we can create our visualizations in this area. We will do that soon, but first we have to take a look at our actual data model. To do this, we simply change from the report view right here to the data view right there. And now you can see that we have our different columns and our table actually in that data model. What we have to change right here is the first column, this country column. Why do I want to change that? Well, in this column we have countries. And Power BI has great functionalities to visualize country-specific data. But we have to tell Power BI that those are countries and not simple text. So to change this, we simply go to the modeling ribbon up here, like this, and now go to data category in this area. And if you press that, then you can see that at the moment we have uncategorized data, which is wrong because we should select country right here because that's the type of data we have. And we can find country right here. If we click that, nothing changed? No, that's not true. We now have that symbol right here. So this seems to work. Let's finally create some visualizations right now. To do this, we have to go back to the report view. So we need to change from this data view back to here, the report view. And now to create a visualization, well, you simply can go to this visualization column right here and select a visualization type by simply clicking it. So let's maybe create a stacked column chart, this one right here. And after clicking it, you can now see this tile. You remember that building block, and we can move it around, of course, but I will simply increase it now or increase the size so that you can see everything. So this is our tile now, and we don't see a lot because we need data. And to add data, you simply go to that fields column right here and now drag the GDP, for instance, because this is the data type that we want to visualize, into the corresponding field of the visualization. And this simply means that we drag and drop it from here. So I'm clicking and holding the left mouse button and now drag it to the value field right here, like this. Because I selected the visualization, so this area now refers to that visualization. However, this chart doesn't look good at the moment, so we have to add some more information. For instance, the different years. To add the years, we simply select it right here and drag it to the axis area right there, like this. Now it looks better. But I want to add more. Because you remember, we also have that country data. So why don't we also add this data to our visualization? To do this, we simply select the country right here and drag it to the legend field right there. Now our chart looks better, but I think we have too much information in that chart. So we might set a filter to only see the top 10 countries by the total GDP. To do this, we simply keep the visualization selected right here. Now scroll down in this visualizations column and select the country right here. Now we can scroll down a little bit and change it from the basic filtering to the top N filter, like this. And now we can simply decide that we only want to see the top right here. And if we click into that box right here and define the top 10, well, the top 10 by what? By the GDP. So we simply again take the GDP right here and drag it into that by value field. Now we press apply filter down here, like this. And you can see that we now only have the top 10 countries in our visualization. But you remember, we worked on the data model and explained Power BI that we have data for different countries. So maybe there is a better way to visualize that. And of course there is. If you want to change the visualization type, you can simply do this by selecting a different visualization in this area. And a good visualization right here would be a world map, right? Now, the good thing is we have such a map right here. And if we now click that, and you of course still selected our visualization, so we click that now the visualization changed. And now we still have the annual data in here. If you want to exclude the years, as you can see right here, and only display the total values, so the sum of all the years included in that data model, then you simply go to the fields column again and unselect the year right here. And if we then click right here into this formatting area right here and add the category labels, then we can also see the names of these top 10 countries, which makes the visualization even better. And this is it. We now finished our visualization and with that our initial course project. And now that you saw some of the basic functions of Power BI Desktop and how easy to use it is, you probably want to know more. And you will, of course. And Maximilian will show you now what exactly you will learn in this course.
Now that Manuel will walk you through the basic building blocks of Power BI. How is this course structured? What does this course have to offer for you? And which part will be done by Manuel and which parts will be done by me? Well, right now we're still in the welcome and first steps part. We're getting started, but we're almost done. Thereafter, we'll have a look at Power BI Desktop in detail. So how does it work? What does this tool offer? Before we then dive into the query editor in Power BI Desktop still. How can we query data? How can we import data? And how can we manipulate or structure the data when importing it? We'll then have a look at the data view. The data view allows us to still work with our data, but not in the import step, but after we import it, so that we structure the data or manipulate it, model it to our needs. Once we have the data in the structure, the format, and the way we want to use it, we can move on and we can have a look at the report view, and we will. This report view will then allow you to, output reports with tables, with visuals, with measures, as you will learn. So single values, for example, you can output. And that is, of course, the thing which is most interesting to your executives or things like that, where you present your data, where you create nice reports with the key results of your data. Thereafter, we'll have a look at the other parts of the Power BI universe. As Manuel mentioned, it's not just Power BI Desktop. It's Power BI Service and mobile too. So how can you collaborate on your data? How can you share it with others? And how can you access it from mobile devices? Now, up to this point, everything will have been done by Manuel. Now I will create my first module or show my first module. In the Other Data Sources module, I'll have a look at some other data sources than the data sources used so far in the course. Manuel will mainly work with a CSV file since it's a very common data source, but I will then also show you how to work with JSON, data from RESTful web services, and MySQL or in general SQL databases. Thereafter, another module done by me, I'll have a look at how you can create your own custom visuals, so that is custom charts basically you could say, for Power BI. Here we will learn how that works. You will need a bit of programming knowledge for that though, so that is certainly required, or at least the willingness to learn it. But with that, you get a powerful tool of really customizing Power BI to your needs and creating the exact chart or visual in general you need. Well, and after we had a look at this, Manuel will take over again and do the roundup of the course, giving you a brief overview over what you learned and how you progressed through the course. So, a lot of great content walking you from A to C through Power BI and giving you a very complete introduction to it. Throughout the course, you and Manuel are going to work with the course dataset. And of course, this starts basic at importing it, then adjusting the import to your needs, and so on. And therefore, the course project, the Power BI file, will also change. Now, to give you a chance of catching up if you're lost or if you want to compare Manuel's solution with yours, you can download the latest version of the project from time to time, and you will therefore find zipped files attached to some of the course lectures. Now I'm going to show you how to use these files, because you'll have to adjust your import paths since of course you downloaded them to your machine and the paths will vary or will differ from the ones Manuel used. So here is how to do that. You of course extract that file, and once you did this, you will have the Power BI file and the source folder. Now we can open that Power BI file and it will open Power BI desktop, but as soon as this is finished, you will see that we have an issue. If we go to the query editor in our case here and let it load, you see of course it doesn't find the source file because it still references the path on Manuel's machine, and unfortunately there's no way of avoiding this since Power BI needs absolute paths. So what you will have to do to fix this is you will have to go to the advanced editor here, and here you can edit this path. And you should simply adjust it so that it points to your CSV file. So in my case, where I also stored this on the desktop, I'll go back to my Explorer, grab this path here, which is where the Power BI file lives, go back to the advanced editor and replace everything in front of source, because I still have that folder in there, with my path. Now with that being done, we can hit done and you see the data is there. If you still experience issues, you should hit refresh preview to really force Power BI to update your paths. And with that, unfortunately, you'll have to do that for all your imports here. I know this can be inconvenient, but this is the only way of fixing these paths. However, once you do have that path, the new path copied or stored in your clipboard, it's really easy to go in there and change it in all the places where it is used. Once you did exchange it everywhere where it was used, all the other queries, which are based on other queries where you did actually import it, should update automatically. So you don't need to exchange it in all the queries, only in the queries where you of course reference these files. Queries depending on queries where you referenced it will be updated automatically. If they aren't, hit this refresh preview button I was mentioning earlier. And with that, you should be good to go, and you should be good to use these source files if you want to compare Manuel's setup with yours and want to see what he actually did there and if something is unclear. So that is just a little help. Enjoy the course.
So we finished the introduction right now and have a basic overview of the Power BI universe. Now it's time to dive a little deeper. And we will start our deep dive with the first tool, with Power BI Desktop. Let's first take a quick look at the workflow of that tool. So generally, we can divide Power BI Desktop or the workflow in that tool into 3 steps. The first step is the data preparation, so the connection to the source files and the cleaning of the data we imported. After we are happy with that basic data, we can then import the data into our data model. This is the second step, the data modeling. Here we can continue our work on the data, and as soon as we finished our real data model, we can go to the third step, the data visualization. Now, for all of those steps, Power BI Desktop has certain tools or views. Let's see what that is. So for the data preparation, we have the query editor. This is kind of an integrated separate tool which allows us to, well, prepare the data, right? And to clean and shape the data we want to have in our later model. We will have a look at that query editor in detail in the next module. As soon as we finish the preparation, we need two things for the data modeling. We need the relationship view and the data view. Both views are connected because you can create relations between the different tables and columns you have in the data view with the relationship view. So that's why you have two views in your actual data modeling part. Now, for the last step, the data visualization, you have the report view. This is the view where we can create our visualizations, charts, tables, and so on. Now, we could continue talking about this in theory, but I think it's better if we just switch to our initial GDP project from the first module and see where we can find those workflow steps and those tools and views in the actual Power BI desktop interface. Let's find that out. So this is the last thing we saw in our GDP project. The only difference is that little box in the upper right part of that screen. And as you can see, we are now in the last step. So we are in the data model, but in the data visualization step and the report view. Now, how does this interface work and how does this fit to the workflow we see up there? Let's find that out in the next video. So we talked about the workflow of Power BI Desktop. Now it's time to understand the interface. So here we have the final output of our GDP project. And this means we are in the report view with our final visualization. So one important note before we start. Everything we will see in that video is the actual data model. So the first step, the query editor with the data preparation, this is not presented right here. This is a separate menu that has to be opened, and we will cover the interface of that menu in the next video and the details on how we can work with that query editor in the next module. Nevertheless, keep in mind that there is a big difference between the query editor, where you prepare the data, and the actual data you import into the data model, which can be seen in the interface we are talking right now about. After knowing this, let's start with the interface. So basically, you have four core areas. You have the ribbons on top, you have that left column right here, you have that center part where you can see the actual content of each view, and you have that columns to the right. Now, I talked about views. The views can be selected in the left column. At the moment, we are in the report view, and it is displayed right here. The report view is the view where we generate our visualizations. Now, if we switch to the data view, which is the second button, then we see the actual data model, so the data we created and we worked on throughout that data modeling step. The third button opens the relationship view. This is the view that allows us to connect the tables in the data model with each other. So that's the first thing you have to know. You have three views, and you can select those views by clicking onto the different buttons in the left column. Now let's focus on the right part of the screen, that visualizations and that fields column. The visualizations column, well, that column allows us to select different visualizations that we have in Power BI Desktop. For instance, if I select our world map like this, and then press onto that column chart, then the visualization type changes. We did not change anything about the content that should be displayed. If I want to change the content, then I have to change the fields column or the selected columns in the fields column. So at the moment we selected country and GDP. And we don't have a lot of data to play around with at the moment, so I won't change a thing right here. Now let's change that visualization back to our map that we had by simply clicking it. And let's focus on that columns, because now I will switch to the data view. And in the data view, we see that that visualizations column is gone. This has a simple reason. You cannot visualize anything right here, so you don't need that column. However, the fields column is still here. And this makes sense, because you need that column, for instance, to create measures. You may not know what measures are at the moment, but you will learn that, so don't worry. But you can create those measures, for instance, in both views, in the report view and in the data view. And this might be a nice help if you are looking at some visualization and you see that you are missing some important information that you need a calculation for. However, in this course, we will focus on the actual data modeling and the creation of such measures in the data view. And in the report view, we will really only create the visualizations and the outputs. But you are free to work with Power BI Desktop as you prefer, so I just wanted to tell you that. Now, if we select the last view, the relationship view, we see that the fields column disappears. And this makes sense, because in this view, every content will be displayed as a box. And by every content, I mean every table of the data model with the corresponding columns, because this allows you to connect that tables and that columns with each other. However, you might note that we have table 1 and then the column names, which are equal to the table and the column names in the fields view. So basically, it's just displayed differently with some different functionalities, but the content is basically the same. Now we understand the left column, the center part, and the right columns. So the last thing we need to understand is that ribbons part appear. At the moment, we see 5 ribbons. This is because I selected our visualization, so our world map. Let me just unselect that by clicking into the report. And now we see that we have 3 general ribbons, so the home, the view, and the modeling ribbon. We'll talk about the file ribbon later. So the home ribbon doesn't change. The only thing that changes is the functionalities that are available depending on the view you selected. For instance, the new page functionality will only work in the report view. In the data view, we cannot create visualizations, so the available functionalities change. Nevertheless, the home ribbon is available in all of the views, as you can see. This is different for the remaining 2 ribbons, the view and the modeling ribbon. The view ribbon is only available in the report view, because here you can play around. You can define how you want to display your report, and you could also try out what your report would look like in a phone layout. You don't need that functionality in the data and the relationship view though. So if we change the data view, we see that we don't have the view ribbon. The same thing is true in the relationship view. So that's another outcome. We know that the columns change and that the ribbons change depending on the selected view in the left column. Now let's see what happens to the last ribbon, the modeling ribbon. So here we can model our data, we know that. And we can do the same thing in the data view. That's what we talked about, that you are free on where you want to model your data, but we will focus on the data view for that modeling purposes. If we go to the relationship view, we see that the modeling options are, well, reduced, right? And this again makes sense, because you don't model your data in that view. You only create those relationships. And you can do that if you go to the home ribbon and then select Manage Relationships. At the moment, there is not a lot to manage because we only have one table in our data model. But this is how it would work, and we will see how this works, of course. So this is it. Let me now go back to the report view. And by that, we now have a basic understanding of the interface of the data model. However, we still have that query editor, right? So that data preparation part. Let's take a look at the interface of that query editor in the next video. We now know the interface of the data model. Let's see what we can do in the query editor then. So this is where we stopped in the last video. We are in the report view of our GDP data model. Let's now open the query editor and see what the interface looks like there. To open the query editor, you simply go to the home ribbon and select Edit Queries. Now we can maximize that. And the first thing you might note is that this looks kind of similar to the view we had before in the data model. However, there are a lot of differences. The main difference is that ribbon area up here. We have more ribbons and a lot more functionalities. Now, we will not talk about those functionalities right now, because in the next module, where we will start our first real project, we will look at a lot of those functions in detail. So for now, the only thing you have to know, the ribbons provide a lot of functionalities to work with our queries. But we'll see how this works. So let's go to the left column then. We had that view selection in the data model. Here we don't have view. The only thing you can change right here is the selected query. Now, in our case, we only connected one data to that Power BI desktop project. But if you connect more data, then you could select all of your data connections, so by that, all of your queries, in that view. If you then go to the right column, you see that you have that query settings. Here you can do two things mainly. The first thing is you can change the name. So you could write table 1, 2, press enter, and you see that the name changed. So let's undo that. This is one functionality. The more important functionality is this applied steps table right here. This table shows you each step you applied to your query. And you remember, we changed some things, and we can see every change right here. Now, you cannot only see what you changed, you can also undo your changes by clicking that X right here. We'll see how this works and how great and helpful it actually is in the next module. So just keep in mind, whatever we do is tracked right here. And by saying tracked right here, I also have to add something. If you look into that formula bar, and this is also something new, you might note that we didn't have that in the data view or in the data model actually. The reason for that is that the query editor and the actual data model work with two different formula languages. This is the so-called M language, whereas the data model works with the DAX. Now we'll talk about the DAX language in more detail later on. What you have to know for the moment regarding that M language in the query editor is that each of the steps you apply is also presented in a formula view. So you can see what happens from the code perspective actually. Now, you could learn that M language, of course, no problem. But the query editor is built in a way that you have a lot of implemented functions. So normally you don't need to learn that M language to do the general tasks that are necessary to shape your data. Nevertheless, you can see what happens with the code step by looking into that formula bar. So I'll come back to that from time to time throughout our data shaping and cleaning in the next module. So that's it. We now saw the interface of the data model in the last video, and we saw the interface of the query editor in that video. Now, before we start with our first project and dive really deep into that query editor, let's take a look at the options and see if we have to adjust something to make sure that Power BI Desktop works the way we want it to work. We'll do that in the next video. Before we start our first course project, let's take a look at the options. So this is still the query editor, and we have to close that to access the options menu. So we go to the home ribbon and press close and apply. Now we are back in the data model, and before we change the options, one important note again. In the options, we have two option types available: global options and current file options. The global options are set for all Power BI projects. The current file options, as the name says actually, are only true for the current file where you set those options. So this means we have to open a new Power BI project, which we will then use for our course project to make sure that the options are set correctly. Now, let's do this. So we go to the File ribbon, press New. Now it takes a few seconds to load the new Power BI Desktop instance. Here it is. We can close that for a moment because we don't import any data right now. And we can now go to File again, go to Options and Settings. Here we see that we have data source settings, which we will not take a look at right now. And we have options, which we will select. And in the options, you see that global and current file options. We don't have to change that global options, so we can directly go to current file and the data load section. Here, I want to adjust three things. The first thing I want to adjust is I want to unselect the automatic data detection. This is not happening because I think this is a bad option. This is a great option actually. But I don't want the data to be detected automatically. I want to do that on our own, so that you see how this works and that you really get an understanding on how Power BI Desktop understands the data. This is why we unselect this one. The same logic is true for the relationships. Power BI automatically detects the relationships that might exist between the tables in your data model. Nevertheless, although this works good, we will unselect that to define that relationships on our own and to understand the relationships better. So let's unselect that. And the last thing is the background data loading option. This has simple performance reasons, so the query editor is faster if you unselect that. So let's do that. Now we are fine. We can now press OK to save the options. And now we also have to save that project, which will be our course project. Because as we said, we have that option set for the current file only. So if we start our project in a new file, then the options won't be set the way we did it right now. So let's save that by clicking onto File and Save As. And I will call that 01 population, because that's what the data are going to be about. And you can now select a folder where you want to save that project. And in the next video, we will start working on the project. And with that, we reach the end of this course excerpt. I hope you saw that Power BI is a powerful and really awesome tool. And if you're interested into more right now, then feel free to have a look at the different videos here on the channel. Or, as I said in the beginning, I would also be really happy to welcome you on board of the Power BI, a complete introduction course on Udemy. I have to say it again, you can find the link down there in the video description. So I hope to have you on board, either here or on Udemy or on both platforms. And as always, the only thing I can say right now, thanks a lot for watching and hope to see you in the next videos. Bye.